everyone, my name is Phoebe and this is my presentation on Understanding the Business Environment, Assignment 3. So, moving to the first question, using a diagram showing consumer and producer surplus, show generally how consumption tax impact customer and producer welfare. And there are 5 steps to this. The first is before the tax, the second is after the tax, the third is deadweight loss, 4 is tax revenue, and 5 impact on welfare. These are the 5 points that we're going to be talking about. And for the first point, there is before the tax. So in this particular part, consumers pay a certain price and it is labeled P1 in the graph. And they also buy a certain quantity which is labeled Q1. The difference between what consumers are willing to pay and what they actually pay is called consumer surplus, while producers receive for each unit they sell, and the difference between their cost and the price is called producer surplus. And the next part is after the tax. Basically, when tax increases the price that consumers pay, which is labeled P3, and reduces the price producers receive to P2, and the new quantity of goods sold is Q2, which is less than before. Then, the third point we want to talk about is the deadweight loss. Because of this tax, fewer goods are bought and sold, thus creates a deadweight loss, which is called DWL. It is represented by the small triangle between the new quantity Q2 and the old quantity Q1. It shows the total loss to consumers and producers that is not offset by the tax revenue. Then the fourth point, we have the tax revenue. The government collects tax revenue. That comes from the difference between what consumers pay and what producers receive, shown as the rectangle between P2 and P3. And lastly, what I want to talk about is the impact it has on welfare. Customer welfare decreases because they pay more for fewer goods. Thus, they get less money and sell fewer goods. The deadweight loss represents the lost welfare that both consumers and producers get back. Moving on to the next question. Using a demand and supply diagram, explain what a tax on imports, called tariffs, would look like. Explain the differences between the DWL in question 1 and question 2. And the thing we're going to be talking about is a tariff. When a tariff is introduced, it effectively increases the price of imports, leading to a new supply curve as shown in S2, which is higher than S1. The tariff raises the price from P1 to P2, reducing the quantity of imports demanded and increasing benefits domestic producers because their goods become relatively cheaper compared to imports. DWL happens because a reduction in consumer surplus because of the higher price and because of inefficient domestic production replacing cheaper imported goods. A rectangle between P1 and P2 shows the government tariff revenue that was collected from imports that are still purchased after the tariff. Consumption tax is basically when the DWL arises primarily from reduced consumption due to higher prices across the board. And lastly, tariff is when a DWL caused by reduced consumption and efficient domestic production. It means that imports are discouraged even when they are more efficient. The next question is explore how generative AI could affect inequality in the labor market. Consider 2 scenarios, one where generative AI reduces inequality and one where generative AI increases inequality. And use labor market diagrams to illustrate each scenario and explain the underlying mechanisms. So as seen from the image on the right here, there are 2 points that I want to put out. The first is if generative AI increases inequality and the demand for low-skilled labor might fall, shown as the shifting in demand curve leftward. Wages for low-skilled workers will decrease, then increasing inequality. The next scenario is if generative AI reduces inequality. Generative AI might increase the demand for higher skilled jobs or improve the productivity of workers, shown as the shifting in demand curve to the right, thus further leading to higher wages and employment, further reducing inequality. Moving on to the next question, explore how generative AI could affect productivity and output in the economy. Consider two scenarios, one where generative AI potentially boosts productivity, and one where generative AI leaves productivity largely unchanged. Use an aggregate demand and aggregate supply diagram to illustrate each scenario and explain the underlying mechanisms. So as seen from the graph, AI boosts productivity. As curves shift from S1 to S2, representing increased productivity, output increases from Q1 to Q2. More goods and services are produced. Then, price level decreases from P1 to P2, reflecting lower production costs and cheaper prices. AI automates tasks, improves efficiency, makes everything faster, and enables economic growth through higher productivity. However, on the next scenario, AI leaves productivity unchanged. So there will be no shift in the AS curve, stays at S1, meaning no change in the economy's productivity. Output will remain the same, staying at Q1, no increase in production. Price level also unchanged, remains at P1, no impact on prices. AI is not widely adopted or integrated efficiently, leaving productivity at the current level, which is why it's very important to be using AI in the right place, or it will just not build any efficiency and just not change anything. Lastly, moving on to the last question, briefly discuss how you could use behavioral economics to understand why people choose unhealthy food options, even if a change would be preferred. And the answer to this is, first, we have present bias. So people tend to prioritize immediate rewards, like tasty, rather than a healthy lifestyle. They prefer something that they can enjoy right now, which is food that tastes good. They prefer this over long-term health benefits. The desire for instant gratifications end up making humans choose poor dietary decisions. Then, the next one, we have habitual behavior. Basically, once humans start eating unhealthy foods and they build unhealthy eating habits, they are hard to break due to routine and comfort. People tend to stick with something familiar, something convenient. Therefore, they choose food choices that are bad even when they know healthier alternatives exist. Then we're gonna talk about bounded rationality. Basically, individuals tend to lack the full information, or they don't have the ability to make optimal choices. They may not fully understand the health consequences of their food choices, and they fail to calculate long-term risk. Like, basically, they do not have enough information, and they tend to just make decisions right now and not calculate what's going to happen in the future. The next factor we have is social influence. Basically, unhealthy food choices happens to humans because of peer pressure, marketing, and cultural norms. These things that pressure people into society shapes unhealthy food preferences. Like, for example, we scroll through TikTok and we see something unhealthy that everybody is trying. We would want to join on and follow unhealthy decisions, although we know it is bad for us. Like, sometimes fast food and junk food are often socially acceptable and heavily advertised. It makes people don't want to feel left out. They want to try it out, but then they're not realizing that they're putting their healthy long-term life in stake. Then the last factor is exposure. So basically, like fast food, which is highly convenient and accessible, the frequent exposure to unhealthy food options, making them the top of mind when deciding what to eat. Let's say when we're super hungry, instead of thinking of foods that will benefit our health, we would think about something that would satisfy our cravings right at that moment. And people tend to choose fast foods because they think that when they're hungry, they choose unhealthy foods, they will come fast, but they forget to consider other factors. Thank you so much for staying till the end of my presentation. Unfortunately, that is all I have for today, and thank you for listening.